My husband stood in front of 40 of his relatives, pointed at the front door, and told me to apologize or get out. He said it the way a man says something when he's already certain which answer he's about to get. 16 days later, his mother was calling local hospitals. His sister was calling my old coworkers. Patrick himself spent an entire Saturday parked outside 2 apartment buildings I'd mentioned once, years earlier, convinced I'd just gone somewhere nearby to cool off and would eventually crawl back, the way I always had before. Not one of them considered, even for a second, that by then our son and I were already living 4,000 miles away, under the name I was born with instead of his, behind a front door none of them had ever seen. My name is Margot. I was 33 the year my husband handed me an ultimatum he never actually expected me to take him up on. Patrick and I had been married 7 years, with a 3-year-old son, Theo. For most of that marriage, I spent more energy keeping peace with Patrick's family than enjoying my own life. Patrick wasn't cruel in any way you could point to on paper. He worked hard, adored Theo, paid his half of everything. But the second his family walked into a room, something in him switched off. He stopped being my husband and became their son again, their brother, their referee. Except he never once refereed anything in my favor. His mother, Carol, had an opinion about everything I did. How I cooked, how I dressed Theo, how I spoke to him at dinner. I tried understanding her, then tolerating her, then I just got tired, and every time I brought it up to Patrick, I got the same 6 words back. That's just how she is. The afternoon everything finally cracked open was a Saturday cookout at Carol's house. 40-some relatives filling the yard, kids running through a sprinkler. Theo was beside me, eating a bowl of cut fruit, when Carol walked over, looked at his plate, and frowned. Still cutting out sugar? That's excessive. I told her calmly it was his pediatrician's recommendation, not mine. She rolled her eyes hard enough that I heard it. Before I could say more, Patrick's sister, Brooke, leaned in laughing. God, Margot reads one parenting blog, and suddenly she's running a clinic. A few relatives laughed along. My face went hot. Normally I'd have smiled and changed the subject. The way I had at probably 40 gatherings just like it. That day, something in me had simply run out of room. I don't think following actual medical advice is something to laugh at, I said. Not loud, just clear. The table went quiet, then didn't stay quiet for long. Carol crossed her arms. There she goes again. There I go what, I said. Being difficult. Disrespectful, like always. That word landed somewhere I wasn't ready for. Disrespectful. For defending a doctor's note. Within a minute, the whole story had flipped. I wasn't the one who'd been mocked anymore. I was the one attacking the family. I looked at Patrick, waiting for one sentence. Mom, that's enough. He sat completely still, jaw tight, saying nothing, and that silence hurt worse than anything Carol or Brooke had said all afternoon. When Brooke added that I always make these things difficult, I finally answered her, calmly, without raising my voice, and told them exactly what 7 years of this had felt like from where I was sitting. The reaction was immediate. Every single person at that table turned on me, Patrick included. He stood up so fast, his chair scraped the patio stone. Margot, stop. I looked right at him. No. The whole backyard went silent, and in front of his entire family, with his face tight between embarrassment and fury, he said the sentence that changed both our lives. Apologize right now or get out. Nobody moved. Every face at that table was waiting for the outcome they'd watched 100 times before. Me folding, apologizing for being upset, smoothing it over so everyone could go back to their burgers. Instead, I went inside, gathered Theo's shoes and backpack, picked him up off the living room floor where he'd been quietly stacking blocks through the entire thing, and left. No speech, no slam door, no tears in front of any of them. That night, after Theo was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table and finally saw the whole thing clearly. The problem was never that one argument. It was 7 years of arguments, 7 years of being the only adult expected to absorb every comment, so everyone else could stay comfortable. Around midnight, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in 3 years. An old college friend, Maeve, who'd moved to Lisbon for work, and once half-jokingly offered me a job at the small design studio she'd helped build there. I'd laughed it off back then. That night, I didn't. I sent her a message I didn't expect to lead anywhere. She wrote back within the hour. The position was still open, and the studio had grown enough that they needed someone immediately. For the next 3 weeks, I told no one. I dropped Theo at preschool, went to work, made dinner, smiled when I was expected to, and quietly rebuilt my future in the background. I spoke to a family lawyer first, mostly to confirm where I actually stood. There was no custody order in place. Theo and I both held valid passports. And relocating with my own son, as his mother and primary caregiver, was well within my rights. I wasn't running from the law. I was done asking my husband's family for permission to live my own life. Maeve handled the practical side from 4,000 miles away. Housing near a preschool with an opening, paperwork, a moving date. Every decision came down to one question. Would this make Theo's life calmer and safer? Patrick did exactly what I expected. For the first few days, he barely mentioned the argument, certain I'd come around the way I always had. Then the texts started. Short ones. You ready to talk yet? We should move past this. Mom feels bad about how it went. That last one nearly made me laugh out loud because in 7 years, nobody in that family had once asked how I felt, only how everyone else felt about my reaction to them. Terrell called constantly. Brooke sent long messages about family unity. I stopped explaining myself, stopped defending anything, stopped handing any of them new material. Silence, it turns out, is its own kind of leverage. People can't twist words you never give them. By the 3rd week, everything was ready. The apartment, Theo's spot at a small bilingual preschool 5 minutes away, the job, the flights. The night before we left, Patrick came home with takeout from the restaurant we used to go to on anniversaries. The same peace offering that had worked on me more times than I want to admit. We sat at the table while Theo slept upstairs. I think we've dragged this out long enough, he said. I looked at him. I agree, I said. True, just not in the way he heard it. He smiled, visibly relieved, certain he'd already won. I knew you'd come around, he said. For one brief second, I almost felt sorry for him. The next morning, the second he left for work, Theo and I were already in a cab to the airport. I left one letter on the kitchen counter. Nothing cruel, nothing dramatic, just the truth. Why I was leaving. What would actually need to change before there was any version of us worth coming back to. And why I refused to keep teaching our son, just by example, that being disrespected was simply the cost of keeping everyone else comfortable. My phone started buzzing around security. By the time we landed, it had gone off more times than I could count. I didn't answer until Theo was asleep against my shoulder in the back of a rental car. Margot, Patrick said the second I picked up, his voice already cracking. Tell me you're not actually doing this. I told him plainly we were safe. Theo was fine, and yes, I absolutely was. This is insane, he said. No, I told him. What's insane is thinking I'd spend the next 20 years apologizing for having boundaries. He didn't have anything ready to say back. For the first time in 7 years, my husband was completely speechless. What I didn't fully understand yet was what was happening on the other end of that silence. Patrick, it turned out, told his own mother and sister almost nothing, out of pride, embarrassment, or one last attempt to control the story. He simply said, I needed space, and would probably be back soon. The problem was that nobody could find me nearby. My number showed an unfamiliar area code whenever I did pick up, and Patrick's version of events got thinner by the day. By the second week, Carol had genuinely started calling local hospitals, certain something terrible must have happened. Brooke was calling my old coworkers, trying to confirm whether I'd quit or simply vanished from my desk. Patrick spent one entire Saturday driving to apartment buildings I'd mentioned once, years earlier, convinced I was hiding nearby, waiting to be found. It wasn't until day 16, with Carol finally pushing him in front of the rest of the family, that Patrick admitted what he'd known since that first phone call. His wife and son weren't missing. We were gone, on purpose, to a different country entirely, and we weren't coming back just because everyone had finally noticed. The months that followed weren't easy. Starting over in a new country with a toddler never is. But something good happened in the middle of it. Theo settled in faster than I expected, picked up a handful of Portuguese words within a month, started sleeping through the night for the first time in over a year. So did I. The distance did something neither of us could have managed while we were still standing inside it. It forced Patrick, for the first time in 7 years, to actually look at his own family's dynamics without 40 relatives' opinions drowning out whatever he might have seen. 3 months in, he called. And for once, it wasn't a text asking if I was ready to talk. It was a real apology, not for one barbecue, but for 7 years of choosing his family's comfort over my well-being. Carol and Brooke eventually apologized too, months later, once it was clear they no longer had any say in how this story ended. These days, my relationship with Patrick is steadier than it's ever been. Not because I forgave everything overnight, but because real boundaries finally hold the whole thing up. He visits Theo and me in Lisbon every couple of months now, and we're slowly figuring out what co-parenting across an ocean actually looks like. Looking back, the most important part was never the flight, the apartment, or even the country. It was understanding that respect isn't something you spend years hoping someone eventually decides to give you. It's something you simply stop letting anyone withhold. The night my husband told me to apologize or get out, he believed he was punishing me in front of his entire family. What he never considered was that he was handing me an exit, and that the version of me who always apologized was about to disappear for good, not into thin air, but into a life he'd never once imagined I was capable of building without him.